Okay, so you want to own a fast food franchise. A recognizable golden arches sign, a drive-through line wrapped around the building at lunch, and a business model so proven that thousands of people just like you have already made it work. You buy in, you follow the manual, customers show up automatically because the brand already did the marketing for you. Simple. Here's the problem. You are about to enter one of the most misunderstood business relationships in the entire corporate world, and the company selling you that franchise is not really in the business you think it's in. The truth is that the biggest fast food company on the planet makes more money from real estate than it does from burgers. And once you understand that single fact, the entire structure of franchising, why it costs what it costs, why the contracts are written the way they are, starts to make complete sense. Let's start with what it actually costs to become a franchisee. To open a single McDonald's franchise, the total initial investment typically runs between $1 million and $2.3 million. That figure includes construction or renovation, kitchen equipment, signage, and initial inventory. On top of that, there's a required down payment. Typically, at least 25% must come from the franchisee's own non-borrowed funds. Then there's the initial franchise fee itself, a one-time payment simply for the right to operate under the brand name, which for a major chain like McDonald's runs around $45,000. That sounds almost small compared to the multi-million-dollar total investment, and that's precisely the point. The real money changes hands every single month through two recurring payments most people don't fully understand. The first is a royalty fee, typically around 4 to 5% of gross sales, paid to the corporation every month regardless of whether the restaurant is actually profitable that month. Royalty is calculated on revenue, not profit, which means even a location that's barely breaking even still owes the corporation its cut of whatever came through the register. The second recurring payment, and the one that reveals the real structure of this business, is rent. In the McDonald's model, the corporation typically owns or holds a long-term lease on the land and building itself, and then subleases that property to the franchisee at a markup. This rent typically runs somewhere between 8 and 15% of the restaurant's gross sales. Add the royalty and the rent together, and a franchisee can be handing over 12 to 20% of every dollar to the corporation. Now here's the number that reframes the entire business. A majority of McDonald's operating income in recent years has come from rental income on properties leased to franchisees, not from royalties on the food itself. The company has described itself internally in terms closer to a real estate investment trust that happens to sell hamburgers than a restaurant company. When you buy a McDonald's franchise, you're not just buying the right to sell burgers. You're becoming a tenant of one of the largest commercial landlords in the world, and your monthly rent check is tied directly to how many burgers you manage to sell. This explains why the corporation is often just as interested, sometimes more interested, in your sales volume as it is in your profitability. A struggling franchisee who is barely profitable but selling a high volume of food is still generating strong rent and royalty income for the corporation because both payments are calculated on gross sales. This is a genuinely different incentive structure than most people assume exists, and it's a large part of why franchise agreements are written with such intense specificity around location, hours, and mandatory participation in corporate promotions. Let's talk about what a franchisee actually has to manage once the doors are open. Food costs typically run around 30 to 35% of revenue. This number is remarkably sensitive to commodity price swings that the individual franchisee has essentially no control over and often can't fully pass on to customers, since menu pricing at many chains requires corporate approval. Labor costs run another 25 to 30% of revenue, and in markets where minimum wage has risen significantly, that percentage can climb further. After food costs, labor, rent, royalty, utilities, insurance, and equipment maintenance, a well-run individual location might net somewhere between 6 and 10% of gross sales in actual profit for the franchisee. That can translate to a genuinely solid income for an owner running 1 or 2 locations well. But the margin for error is thin enough that a bad year of commodity prices or a slow 6 months can turn a comfortable location into a barely breathing one. While the corporation's rent and royalty checks keep arriving at the same percentage regardless. There's a real case that shows exactly how this dynamic can turn adversarial. A number of McDonald's franchisees have filed lawsuits alleging the corporation pressured them into costly kitchen equipment upgrades and remodeling requirements, sometimes running hundreds of thousands of dollars per location, timed in ways some franchisees argued benefited the corporation's real estate value more than the individual owner's profitability. It's one of the clearest examples of how the landlord-tenant relationship sitting underneath the franchise brand can create genuine friction even inside a business relationship. Both sides need to succeed. Not every fast food franchise follows this exact real estate model. Subway, for example, built its franchise system around a dramatically lower barrier to entry, often costing well under $200,000 total to open a location. In large part because Subway historically did not take on the same landlord role that McDonald's did. Franchisees typically signed their own leases directly with property owners. This made Subway franchises accessible to a much broader range of first-time small business owners, which helped the brand expand to an enormous number of locations relatively quickly. But it also meant Subway's corporate revenue depended far more heavily on royalty fees alone, without the stable real estate income cushion that McDonald's built into its model. The word franchise doesn't describe one single financial relationship. It describes a spectrum, and where a specific brand sits on that spectrum changes the entire risk and reward calculation for the person actually running the restaurant. In the optimistic scenario, a franchisee owns a well-located restaurant with strong drive-through traffic, hits solid sales volume consistently, and manages labor and food costs tightly. Sales run around $2.5 million a year. Net profit margin lands around 9 to 10%, generating $225,000 to $250,000 a year for the owner. In the realistic bad scenario, beef and chicken prices spike. A nearby competitor opens a similarly convenient drive-through location, and the local minimum wage increases significantly within the same 18-month window. The corporation's rent and royalty percentages remain exactly the same because they're calculated on gross sales, not on the franchisee's shrinking margin. Net profit can collapse from 9% down to 2 or 3%. So does owning a fast food franchise actually work as a business? The honest answer is yes, for disciplined operators with real capital and strong locations. But it works within a structure that was never designed primarily around the franchisee's profit margin. You're not just buying into a brand and a recipe. You're becoming a tenant, an operator, and a revenue share partner all at once, inside a system where a meaningful share of it is already spoken for before you've paid for a single burger patty. If breakdowns like this are exactly what you come here for, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one, and drop a comment below with the next business you want us to take apart. We genuinely pull a lot of upcoming topics straight from the comment section.